Good morning, everyone, or good evening, good afternoon, good mid-afternoon, wherever and whenever you're listening. I am Maureen Scanlon, and welcome to I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. So happy all of you listeners are here. We're growing, we're building. It's huge. I'm loving all of the interactions with everyone. So keep your comments coming. Keep those 5-star reviews coming. As per usual, we have high standards here on Inc., and today is no exception. I have a really, really good guest for you today. She's fantastic, and I can't wait to dig in and really pick her brain and find out how she became so amazing in her overcoming. So let me tell you a little bit about our next guest, Susan Snow. On Halloween night in 1985, Susan Williams Snow, life changed forever when her father, LAPD detective Thomas C. Williams, was ambushed and killed. Her compelling story of Susan's and family's loss and the road to recovery from trauma provides hope and practical guidance for others who have been touched by violence and loss. Susan reclaimed her life, learned to manage PTSD, and found a path to vulnerability with courage, loss without victimhood, and love with forgiveness. She is a genuine and raw speaker who gives workshops and keynotes that engages her audience, offering a look into her journey through the trauma of losing her murdered LAPD detective father at age 17, PTSD, and finding courage to speak her truth. Her message and healing and resilience will give hope to those suffering with trauma and grief. She's written an amazing book, and we're going to talk about that in the podcast. And the title just gives me goosebumps, and it's called The Other Side of the Gun. It's been described as a powerful story of healing. It is compelling, powerful, an easy and great read. So without further ado, hello, my friend Susan. Good morning.
Wow. Hello. That was quite the introduction.
So far, so good. I'm living up to our high expectations.
You are absolutely doing that.
I think you're amazing. And what we do here is we start with what I call the knee story. So it's that moment in your life that you were brought to your knees and you said, I don't know how I can go on from here. Obviously, from the introduction, sounds like it was that moment at 17 when you lost your father. Can you tell us about how that felt, how you experienced it, how you found out, and how your family dealt with that?
Sure. So, I'll just take you back to that time. I was at home with my mother at the time. I was getting ready to hopefully go to a Halloween party. I had been told no prior to, but being a persistent teenager, I knew that at some point my dad would probably give in and allow me to go to the party. So I was getting ready, and I was Madonna that year, 1985. So my mom had come home, and she was the Tin Man. So she was taking off her makeup and getting her costume off, and the phone rang. And being a teenager, I always tell people this, like, when you're a teenager, you think every time the phone rings, it's for you. Because who's going to call your parents, right?
That's right. The world overall revolves around you.
Exactly. So I ran across the room and grabbed the phone, and it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school. And all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. And I immediately handed the phone to my mom, and she had gotten pretty much all of her makeup off, and she was talking to the lady. I could kind of see her posture, and she started to her shoulders kind of went down, and I knew it wasn't good. And she got off the phone and looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." It was about a 7-minute drive from my childhood home to my brother's school. and we didn't say a word to each other. But as I sat there, I just had this really bad feeling in my gut. And we got there. The school parking lot was in the middle of the school. So we parked there, and all the kids got out from the back of the school. So that's where the parents would pick up the children. And so that's where we started to head. And when we got there, I could see an ambulance, the lights blaring, and I could see police officers walking around, and they had tears in their eyes. And then we kind of looked to our left and we saw my dad's truck. So both my mom and I made a beeline for the truck. And that's when we saw his body and the aftermath of the shooting. There was a police officer that was holding my mom back. She had dropped to her knees. And I just kind of stood there and didn't know what I didn't know how to process what I was seeing. And it was like my brain split in half in that one moment. Because part of me was seeing the ambulance and I couldn't understand why they weren't helping him. And the other side of it was that I was actually physically seeing his body. So they took us back to an office at the school. At this point, I had no idea where my brother was. But it happened in front of him. And my dad's last heroic thing that he did here on earth was to save his son's life. So he told my brother to duck down in the truck because he knew what was coming. And when I was in the office, my mom kind of got taken aside by some detectives, and I was sitting there just trying to process everything that was going on around me. And two ladies were talking, and I could hear the one lady say to the other one that Mr. Williams is deceased. And that's when it snapped in my head. Oh my God, he's gone. And my next thought was, I wanted to bolt. Like, I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. I wanted to run away from this nightmare. But my body wasn't physically, I was not able to do that. It was just, I felt like I had concrete in my legs. Like I couldn't go anywhere, but my brain wanted to run. My mom came to me a little bit after that and said, "You're going with a neighbor." And even though part of me was like, I want to run, the other part of me was, I need to be with my family unit. I want to know where my brother is. Was he hurt? What did he see? But at the same time, I was just spiraling. I was spinning. I didn't know what to do. And now my mom is sending me with a neighbor. So that night, I just had to process everything by myself. The neighbor was in shock, and she's a grown adult and doesn't, all she could do was hug me, and that was about it. She was still trying to process everything. They knew my parents for many years. I was friends with their daughter, best friends with their daughter when we were young. And then at the time I had a boyfriend who I'm now married to. And we had been 3 months into dating when this happened. And the neighbor called him at work that night. He was 19 at the time, and just didn't tell him everything, enough to get him to leave work and come to her house. So when he got there, he was in this mindset that my dad was injured and that we were going to go to the hospital. So when he came to the door, he had no information. And he kept saying, "Okay, get your coat. We're going to go to the hospital. What hospital he's at? Where's your mom? Blah, blah, blah." Right. And he kept saying it over and over again. And my brain was like, I can't say the words. I can't say the words because if I say the words, it's real. And finally, I just blurted it out.
Yeah. I just can't even imagine. None of us who have not experienced this can even put words to what that must have felt like, and the fear for your brother. When did you finally get in touch with your brother?
It wasn't until the next day. When we finally went home that night, my quiet block where I lived was permeated with LAPD Denver metro officers all over. So my house was filled with people that I didn't know. And I was still trying to process things, but at 17, you're not processing much because I was a child too. And so the next day, I mean, I spent most of my room kind of, locked away, hiding. And the next day I saw my brother, and there was nothing left of me, right? I had nothing to give him other than a hug and to tell him I loved him. But because I was in such turmoil myself internally, and I was trying to process everything, and the issue was that and so be it, like all the focus was on him. Clearly, he was 6 years old at the time.
Oh my goodness.
So he was a small child, right? And so the focus went to my brother and my mother, and I was kind of pushed to the side.
Oh my gosh.
And so for 2 days, even the media, I mean, it was a huge story in Southern California, and the media even had no idea he had a teenage daughter for 2 days. So I had 17 years with this man, and he was my best friend. And I didn't know how to function without him. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I had no adults around me that were helping me or guiding me in this journey. My mom was dealing with her own grief, but she was also dealing with a lot of logistical things and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But she also never checked on me. So that feeling of, not feeling important, not feeling a part of the family unit, it started this process in my brain.
Wow. My heart shattered in a million pieces when you said the media didn't even know he had a teenage daughter for 2 days. God, that hurts my heart. And again, we have that empathy that your mom had so much on her plate.
Yeah.
And your brother, he's so little, he doesn't even know what's going on. So we're sort of taking care of this small child. And for you, no, you're fine.
Sorry. Oh my goodness.
No worries.
Go ahead.
And for you, what you said that really stuck out for me was there were no adults around that were helping me through this. And here you are in your room, just in shock, wanting to do the flight response, which is completely normal. Get me out of this situation. It can't be real. And I can't even think about it right now.
Right. Yep.
The level of loss for you without someone to say, you're validated. We hear you. We're so sorry. Let's talk about memories. Let's talk about them. How do you feel? Of course, this would be the start of PTSD. This would be the beginning of a trauma that would probably stay with you forever. And so, oh my gosh, there's like so loaded and my heart is like hurts. But I know where you are now. But so tell us how things progressed, either bad or good for you, or just how long the process took to get to where you had to make some sense of this.
Well, I'll tell you this. About a month after my dad was killed and all the hoopla was over and people had left the house and all of that, LAPD, one of the advocates, I believe, talked to my mom and said, LAPD wanted to pay for some therapy for all of us. And I had no idea what therapy was. In the 80s, there was no talk about mental wellness or mental health or PTSD, none of that, right? So all I thought was if you went to therapy or you saw that kind of doctor, you were crazy.
Yeah, I can speak as a
Especially being
Gen
a kid,
Xer.
right?
In
Like
fact,
you're
1985, I was 15. So
yeah,
I'm right
you're
there
just
with
nuts.
you.
Like if you have to see that kind of, you're crazy. So
Yeah.
that was my mindset. But I thought, okay, well, my mom is telling me I got to go. And so I'm just going to go. And I saw this guy. And unfortunately, I don't think in hindsight, you know, I don't think that he was really equipped to be able to work with someone who has dealt with this level of trauma. So I will put that out.
We're gonna
We're going to put
predecess
that out
it,
there.
even though LAPD like set it up. That's
Yeah,
interesting,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I saw this man for an entire year. And every single session, now understand by this time, PTSD was full fledged, like in me, right? So I was dealing with deep depression, anxiety, panic attacks, suicidal ideation. I wanted to be with my dad, all the time. Like I would think about, well, maybe I'll die today, or maybe I'll die tomorrow, or, that kind of thought process. And it was obviously very unhealthy. And at the time, being a kid myself, I didn't know how to verbalize that.
Mm, yeah.
And so every session I would think he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna figure it out. But all we talked about was my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my brother, my boyfriend, and school. He never asked me the questions that needed to be asked.
Yeah.
So I saw him for an entire year.
Tell us what the questions are you wish he would have asked.
Well, one of them would be, what did that night make you feel like?
Right? Thanks, Captain Obvious. Like, ask me about what happened.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. And he didn't
Um,
even ask,
no,
bringing you to the moment where we can
no,
like just face
no,
it and then
mm-mm.
find a way to move past it. And it
No.
just stayed stuck in there, didn't it?
Yes, I was a mess, an absolute mess. I walked around in a fog. I didn't sleep for an entire year. I don't even know how I got out of my senior year. I honestly don't. But this man, after a year, looked at me and said, you're a well-rounded young lady and you're strong. And I think you're going to be fine for the rest of your life. And I don't need to see you anymore. And I thought, wait, what? Huh? I'm a
You're like,
mess.
have we been talking? Who have I been talking to for the last year? I am not okay.
No, I am not. I am far from okay. So after that conversation, my mindset was, you're just nuts. You have broken, and clearly a professional can't help you. So this is something you're going to be living with for the rest of your life. You're just going to figure it out. So that was the mindset. I had to figure it out on my own all the time. And that followed me for 14 years. And I went through life, and I got married and I had kids, and I did all the things I was expected to do. Right. And same with my husband. Right. He and I were, we were expected to get married because we had been dating for so long. It was the next step, and after you get married, then the next step is you have to have a baby. Right. So we followed the steps. And we moved to Colorado in 97 for a new start. For me, I got sick and tired of looking behind my shoulder because of the people that were involved in my dad's murder. Even though they were in prison, you still have that, feeling of insecurity. So we moved out of state. We moved to Colorado, and 2 years later, we had the Columbine shootings. And I was a hairdresser at the time. So I was with a client. I had set her under the dryer, and I went to the back room to take a break while she was processing, turned on our tiny little TV back in the break room, and the news came on, and it was all of the coverage of Columbine. And so I saw the kids that were my same age when my dad was killed. I saw the ambulances. I saw the police officers. I started to have flashbacks. I started to sweat. I turned pale. I had panic, like I was having a full-fledged panic attack. My coworker came around the corner, and she had no idea what my story was. So she looked at me and said, "Do you have kids there? You don't have kids there, do you? Do you live in that area?" And I was like, "Honestly, I don't know what's happening right now." Because remember, I was going to be fine for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. We never dealt with it. We just pushed it down, tucked it away. And then it said, it's coming out, and it's going to come out in the most unexpected way. And there it was. That trigger was just a hair trigger.
It was huge. And so all of those same emotions came flooding back. And the difference is I got really good at wearing my mask. My mask of, I'm fine. This will go away. This isn't your burden. I will deal with it myself. And so I went back. I did my clients that day. I had a happy face on. I pretended everything was fine. And inside, I was a royal mess. And for 4 days, I was like that. My husband watched me spiral. And 4 days later, he met me at the door, and he said, "You have two choices. You either get help, or I'm putting you in a hospital."
How'd you feel about that? Being confronted with it?
I said, "You're right. I'm out of control. I don't know what to do. I have children now. I can't leave my kids, but I can't feel this pain anymore. This is awful, right? I don't want to feel like this anymore." So I went and I went to the doctor, and the doctor put me on antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he said, "And then we need to find you a therapist."
Okay. And that really probably went over like
a
like
lead balloon.
Yeah, a lead balloon. You go back to that year of this therapy that really didn't do anything for you.
Yep. Yeah, I was like, "A therapist? Really? Huh. Well, the last one couldn't fix me, so what makes you think this one's going to?" So he gave me a name, and I went and I saw this woman, and thank God she specialized in PTSD. Hallelujah. So when I talked to her the first session, I gave her a snippet of what happened, and then of what I was feeling at that very moment. And she looked at me and said, "Susan, everything you have been dealing with since you were 17 years old is 100% normal. because you have PTSD. And I was confused. I was like, what? How can I have PTSD? I didn't go to war. I'm not in the military, right? And she said, no, no. She said, anyone who goes through anything traumatic can experience PTSD. What you need to know, though, is that PTSD does not go away, but you can learn to manage it. And I swear that the sky opened up and rainbows shot out because I had answers. And I finally had some hope, and I finally had someone that could guide me. And so
You've been seeking someone to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
What you feel is valid,
Yeah.
and we have hope, and we can deal with this.
Yep.
You said something interesting. When you had the trigger from the Columbine when you were at work, and you said, I got good at putting on the mask. And listeners, I want to really hone in on this. A mask is not the same as coping. So a mask is just saying to yourself, it's fine, there's no problem, it's not my problem, this has nothing to do with me. Coping is saying to yourself, you're valid in what you feel. Let's label the feeling. Let's sit with it for a minute. Let's process it.
Yeah.
And then let's let it go. And so there's a big difference. People would say putting a mask on is the same as coping with it.
No,
and
it's
telling
totally different.
yourself
Yep.
something different. It's not, right?
Yeah. Because if I was coping, I would know how to handle all the things that came flooding back at me. So, and I didn't have the tools yet, right?
Yet. I love the yet.
So when I met this therapist, she is the one that gave me the tools. And it was a journey, but it had taken me 14 years of not knowing. Every time something came up, every time I was triggered, every time I had anxiety and panic attacks and feelings of insecurities and all of those things, based off the I'm going to say PTS, okay? Because I don't like the D part, the disorder part. Post-traumatic stress, I feel it's not a disorder, right? I feel like that is a very negative connotation to think about. So I talked to other people that have it, and we had a very big conversation around that. And I think that's true. I think we need to get rid of the D because it is a label. And like I said, it is manageable. It can be managed. You have to do the work, though.
Yes.
You have to do the work.
I love that you want to remove the disorder, and everyone who knows me, and in fact, in my book, I wrote the same thing. There's a chapter called Don't Call Me Names. And it's about labeling, because what we do is we give ourselves an identity when we hear a label about ourselves. Oh, I have depression, therefore I'm a depressed person. And then I sort of follow along behavioral wise with what you expect me to have. So I agree with you 1,000,000%. I love something else that you said, which is, I saw a therapist and they couldn't fix me. And what you just said a minute ago was, I had to do the work. And I love that. Therapists, myself as a life coach, we're not here to fix anyone. We're here to just open a door for you to discover the things that don't feel good for you, that aren't working in your life, that control you instead of you controlling them. Something you said that was on your website that I want to know about is the difference between forgetting versus forgiving.
Oh my gosh, I talk about this a lot. I think there's still that feeling that if you forgive someone that has hurt you, that you're doing it for them. And what I say is, no, you're doing it for you. what I tell people is the reason I found forgiveness for the men that were involved in my dad's murder, and even my husband in the book, you'll read, um, is that I needed to take my power back. So in finding that forgiveness, it was for me so that I can take my power back, because I was not going to live my life full of hatred for those people, because it steals your soul. I watched my mother deal with that and still does to this day. She has not allowed herself to move forward. And so it's hard to see that. She's never been able to take her power back. And I was not about to let that happen for myself. So I had to find a way to take my power back and forgive those men who took my dad's life.
Yeah. There's a saying I love that says, you choose who lives in your mind rent free.
Exactly.
It's kind
Yep.
of that same idea of, if I allow that power, you have power over me, and then I'm
Yep.
powerless. And
Exactly.
if I choose to let it go and forgive, then I get my power back, and I choose when I want to visit it again. Because we
Exactly.
can. Nobody says you're completely men in blacking it, with the pen and erasing the
Yeah,
memories.
no.
You're just saying, I always say this with my life coaching when I coach people who've been through trauma. I always say, we have a trauma file. We can leave it on our desk open all the time and read the file, or you can tuck it away in the filing cabinet, and every now and then you can pull it out and revisit it, close it up, put it back in the file cabinet. It's not that the file doesn't exist. It's just I don't have to read the file every single day. Is that a
Exactly.
good analogy?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I tell people, just because I wrote a book doesn't mean that I'm done evolving.
Yeah. As long as you're
Um,
breathing, you're evolving.
I'm going to be evolving until I'm no longer breathing. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a part of the journey. It's still a journey. Right. So, I think then, I mean, the littlest thing, when she first started working with me, the first thing she told me to do was journal. And I just was like, what? But she explained to me, she said, journaling can be done in different ways. You can write, you can do art, you can write songs, music, however you feel most comfortable getting whatever it is swirling around in your head out. Now there's apps you can use, right? That allows you to just dictate your journaling. And so what she explained to me about journaling is that it is a way that you can reprogram your brain when you're feeling out of control. Especially, I don't know if you're the same way, but the minute I lay my head on a pillow, my brain pops on and it just swirls, right? So that was one of the things that I was really dealing with at that very time, was not being able to sleep, because every time I shut my eyes, I would picture that day, that night. I would picture that scene. I would feel those feelings, and it would start my panic attack, right? So every time it started to get dark at night, I started to feel that anxiety, like, oh God, it's almost, time to go to bed. So she said, I want you to sit down and write whatever is swirling around in your head on paper, if that's what you choose to do. And I did. She said, I want you to just do it for I think I did it for 5 days initially.
Yeah.
And I knew what she was doing. She's trying to make it a habit. But but what I started to see is I started to be able to relax and sleep at night, because I didn't have that stuff swirling around in my head. And I thought, wow, that is like the tiniest little thing, but it packs a punch, right?
Yeah.
It really does. And so from there, we started dealing with my anxiety. And she started to teach me tapping techniques, tapping using affirmations. And I started doing that, and I evolved into more of the cognitive therapies as like EMDR and things like that. I will tell you what did the most for me was writing this book.
That was my next question. Being an author myself, I have 2 books out now. It is so cathartic. And I tell people this all the time. I don't care if you're going to publish it, just write it.
Write it.
Just write it, because part of the process of the healing is, and writing as a writer to publish something, is getting over the fear of what people are going to think of you. Or what you're going to say about your mom and your brother.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that for me, my PTSD was being in a domestic violence abusive relationship. So same with me with the journaling. And I only wrote when I was at that place where I didn't know what else to do with my feelings. And
Yep.
I'm not a journaler. I don't do it to this day. I'm more expressive word wise. Obviously, this is good.
Right. This is your
Journaling for
journal.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. And life coaching.
Yep.
So I love that you said that. And I was going to say how helpful and how hard, because it is opening up sort of Pandora's box too. When you write, anyone who's an author out there, listeners, or if you're wanting to write, it's really doing the work in an intense way, right?
Yeah, it is. And people ask me all the time, because I wrote this book at 50.
Yes.
I don't know what it is about that age, but it took me 4.5 years. And there was a lot of fear. You talked about it. Like, in telling my truth, I had to tell my mother's truth, right? And what was that going to do to our relationship? And my brother, he's 10 years younger than me. And he knew I was writing a book. And he told me, he said, whatever you say, I know it's going to be 100%, like, you're not lying, right? And he owns the things that he did. He made some bad choices in life due to his traumas and not having the support system as well. But he's doing fabulous now, mind you. He's doing amazing. He's doing the work. He's doing the work. And
well, and that, I don't mean to interject, but that
okay.
also brings us to a point of how PTS shows up in different ways. It can be addictions, it can be alcohol, it can be
Absolutely.
overeating, it can be
everything. Yep.
I love that you brought that up, because how you dealt with it, how he dealt with it, you just shoved it down, went through the steps in life, did what you were supposed to.
Yep.
And he's like, as a 6-year-old holding on to all this PTS going, by the time I'm 25, I need an escape. So I love that you brought that point up. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That
was a fantastic point.
So yeah, so I have a tagline, I call it bulldoze your fear, because fear keeps you back from everything in life, right? Everything. And so in writing the book, I had all these fears around exactly what you said. Like, this is me raw. This is me, the most vulnerable I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm putting it out there to the world. And I need to be okay with this. Now, if I had not, at 50, if I had not felt like I had the tools to be able to work myself through these things, I would have never have wrote the book. Right. I had to be in a mental place where I was strong enough, and I knew that I was going to be able to pull out of it, and pull myself out of those emotions. And it was not, 4.5 years of just diving and feeling and reliving, and repressed memories came back. It was just a very intense time. But what I figured was I found a purpose on the other side. And so when I was writing, I started to think about the other people out there that my book could touch, that my book can connect with, that my book might be able to help them heal through my words and through my journey. And every time I had that fear start to well up in me, I thought about my purpose, and it allowed me to drive forward. Now, where there were days where I was like done, like I would write and I was just done. And, I'm a realtor by trade, and there were days where I was like, I can't sell houses today. I can't deal with clients today. I need to give myself some grace and allow myself to do something for myself that day and rest or read or, go get my nails done, whatever it was. Right. And it allowed me to keep in a healthy state of mind in order to continue to keep writing.
Yeah. I
And
felt the same thing when I was writing. And I told myself, there's no pressure on when I get this done. If I feel good about writing it, I'm writing it. The minute I don't feel good about it, I'm not doing it. Therefore, I had no writer's block because I wouldn't do it unless I was in the space to do it.
oh yeah. Yeah.
I posted something today on Facebook that I love, and it was a meme, and it said, in Norway, an acceptable way of answering, how's it going, is I'm up and not crying. And I love that because there
Yeah.
are days where, even as a life coach, I mean, people think I'm supposed to be this, blah. And for the most part, I am very energetic, happy, and positive.
Yep.
But I have days where I'm just up and not crying. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
and I love that you mentioned that, because especially going through therapy, going through PTS, going through any mental health improvement, there's going to
Yeah,
be days where you're just up and not crying.
exactly.
Good.
Yeah,
That's a good thing.
exactly. And I think, that was, I during the time, now understand, my husband and I have been together almost 38 years now.
Wow.
Actually, we have been together 38 years. We've been married 31 years, and he's been through this journey with me. So this book is not just about, this isn't just my journey, it's his journey too. It's our journey together. So when I was writing it, I tried to give him snippets like, here, do you want to read this? Do you want to read that? He's like, no,
Until it's
I
done.
don't want to read it until it's done, till it's on paper, till it's printed. And I was like, okay.
I love that for you. And I love that you guys, because I am a relationship coach. So for me to hear that the two of you have been together for 38 years through all of these struggles, it says so much about you guys being twin flames, and
Yes.
that you know how to work through the hardest things
Yes.
possible in life, because it will break a relationship.
Absolutely.
Not because there's any blame. It's just, if we're not sharing, if we're not open, if we're not
Right.
vulnerable and being accepted and validated for our feelings, that's when our relationships go haywire.
Well, and
And
I think, yeah, I mean, and I think, he's dealt with a wife that had lived in fight or flight for so many years. And I was just trying to figure out myself, right? We never discussed his trauma.
oh yeah, that's a great
And,
point.
and trauma can lead to behaviors that, that aren't healthy. But at the same time, I think, part of my issue was, and we had a long discussion one night because my coach brought it up. She said, anytime, do you honestly feel like you've never had support? And I had to sit back because I'm in a different state of mind now. I've gone through some, the work, right? And so I thought, oh gosh, no. And she said, I want you to have 5 conversations with people that have tried to support you in some way, and that you didn't allow them to do it because your mindset was, this is my burden and I will figure it out. And he was one of those conversations. And I went to him and I said, please forgive me. because I feel like with me doing that, you coming to me and trying to be supportive in some sort of way, and I was not receiving it, that I made you feel like you weren't important.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And
That's
it was
amazing.
a huge shift. Yes. And then he
Because
read
it's
my book.
also for a man, their ego takes a hit when they're rejected. And in a way,
Absolutely.
it was a rejection from you.
Yeah,
He wants to fix it for you. And
absolutely.
he couldn't
Yes,
because he was rejected every time you said, I got to do this myself.
exactly. So that was a shift for sure. Um, and then when he read my book, it was like I gave him an insight, a behind the scenes of things that some of the things that he was aware of, some of the things that he did that that he owns. But he also recognized that this was our journey. And so I'm not just talking about me. This was our journey. And
Right.
he was right there alongside me.
Oh my gosh.
So
So
it's,
I'm going to shift us a little bit to
sure.
how you've overcome writing the book and really
Oh, yeah.
seeing things from a different perspective. And you do the speaking. So, what I want to know is what are the immediate three things you tell people to do who have recognized they're experiencing PTS?
Yep. Well, one, I tell them to seek therapy.
Yes.
Caveat to that. A lot of people will go to a therapist because it's in their network, because it's someone they were told to see by their doctor, by whatever, right? That's not always the best fit. And a lot of people feel like they're stuck with that person. So they'll continue, kind of like what I did, is they continued seeing that person thinking that it's going to get better, it'll get better, it'll get better, and it doesn't, right? So right off the bat, when you sit down with that therapist, you're the one driving this bus,
Yep.
not them. So if you don't feel a connection with this person, now understand, you're going to be the most vulnerable that you can be when you're doing the work. So you have to be able to trust this person and be connected.
Yes,
If
I
you're not,
agree.
the work that you do is going to be for naught, because you're not going to get the healing that you're seeking, right?
I
So,
completely agree as a life coach who does not accept insurance, because by not having to be a part of that, we have the openness and the ability to do completely unconventional and different things geared just specifically towards you. And
right.
yes, it's going to be more costly, but the results in my experience
Yeah,
with my clients, the results are going to be faster and they're going to be
right,
more intense.
right.
And I'm all about therapy, life coaching, counseling, anything, Reiki healing, any of it. You
Any of
are
it.
right.
Mhm.
Find that person that you have a rapport with, that you feel safe with. My
Yep.
goal as a life coach is always, this is a safe space for you. And you are sharing the most vulnerable, scary, fearful places in your mind and in your heart. And I don't take that lightly.
And
It
I
is.
also tell people, whatever you're going through, like, if it's an addiction issue, or if it's domestic violence, or if it's whatever, make sure that that parent, that particular person specializes in that, because they will know exactly the road that you need to go specifically to you. So that's my first order.
Yes, definitely. Love it. Number two.
Number two is I feel like um, they need to understand that vulnerability, excuse me, is not weakness. And so in order to be vulnerable, you're actually being brave. It's bravery, it's not weakness. And I say this to men a lot
Mhm.
because I've had conversations where they have been afraid to be vulnerable about what it is that they're going through, and it's kept them from moving forward, and it's kept them from healing. And so I tell them, vulnerability makes you brave. It takes a lot of guts to put it out there like that. That's for me. I try to be vulnerable with someone so that it gives them a safe space, right?
Yeah, I love that.
And the third thing that I would say is that they're not alone. I think they're not alone. And if they feel like, if they're comfortable with being vulnerable or whatever, seek out, books, or seek out, it's what I did. I sought out books that would help me heal by understanding what that other person was going through, right? And that I wasn't alone. Or if you're okay with groups, join a group.
Yeah, I always think
Someone where
leaning
you can
on,
feel like you're not alone in this
right,
journey. Yeah.
right. Or listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
Um,
Podcasts now. Yeah.
like this one where you can connect with someone like Susan who's been there, done that, and you can reach out and say, "Hey, I'm going through this thing. What can I do?" Support groups.
Yep.
We're here to lean on each other as humans. And
Absolutely.
I think we hold so much so close to the vest that we're so afraid of being judged that we harm ourselves.
Yep.
And I
And we
love,
can harm others as well.
yeah,
I've had this conversation multiple times, and I've heard this saying multiple times: hurt people hurt people.
yeah, yeah.
And it is absolutely true. If you haven't healed within yourself, the things around you are going to suffer. Your relationships are going to suffer. Your work ethic is going to suffer. Like, there's so much to lose by not taking care of number one, which is yourself.
That's right. It's tentacles in every area of your
It
life.
is. Yep.
And I love the vulnerability. And you are correct. Every male client that I've had, when they finally came for coaching, they did the work faster and gave it their all because they were finally able to express themselves. And this is changing now, where society allows men to speak their truth, to be vulnerable, to say, I have some mental health struggles, programming children to be a man and man up. I hate all of that. So now we're changing that dynamic. So I think that's great advice, listeners. Number one, seek therapy, coaching, counseling. Number two, vulnerability is not a weakness. And number three, you are not alone. And that's just some of the stuff she advises. So she's going to tell us where to find her website, where to find her books, and any other courses or workshops, anything that she gives. So here's your moment.
Well, so my website is susansnowspeaks.com. It's pretty easy. And my book is available on Amazon. It's on Kindle, and it's paperback. I am currently working before the end of the year, is my goal, to get it on audio. I'm doing it myself. I'm going to read my own book. And so I have to, that's a whole nother animal. And I'm pretty excited. I have a collective authors signing this weekend in Castle Rock, Colorado, at Ecclesia. And nice. I'm pretty excited. I'm going to be with 5 other amazing authors. And so I love to speak. My biggest goal in life is to speak on a stage to 10,000 people, and get my message out.
Yeah.
I think it's an important message, and it's my purpose is to help others.
That's right. all those experiences we get in life that we ask for, if we pay it forward. That is our purpose, and that's healing for not only them but us as well. So I
Yeah.
love that, and perfect timing as we close out, because we have such heavy topics here on Inc. I like to end it on a high note. So I have a little segment right now, and it's called "How Weird Are You?" And I want to know your like quirkiest, odd thing that you do that other people don't do. So we've had examples like I tell my dogs everything I'm doing during the day because I'm a super dog person. And what else? I mean, like if you clean things obsessively, or if you just anything where you eat something every day that's different. So tell us a weird thing you have.
Well, I'll tell you a weird thing that I do that my husband thinks is weird,
Okay.
but it's not really weird because lots of people do it. I put butter in my coffee.
Okay. I have heard that. I do think it's weird because I'm a coffee addict. Really? Is it good?
It's delicious.
Like straight real butter.
Real butter. Yeah.
How
Grass fed,
much?
just a little pat of butter.
Huh.
And yeah, I mean, he makes fun of me if we go out like for breakfast. I'll ask for coffee, a pat of butter, and heavy cream. Like he's just like, oh God, okay. You know?
I can relate because I take a little coffee with my cream. So when we're at a restaurant, you know, how they have those little bowls full of creamer. My
Uh-huh.
husband's like, "Oh, that's not going to do it. Can you bring her a couple more bowls?" So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm the coffee drinker that doesn't like the taste of coffee. So I have to put a bunch of stuff in it.
That's right.
And butter, it just one, it's the fat and it keeps you fuller longer. Um,
Oh, I
it was a
like that.
keto thing, and that's how I started it. I was never a coffee drinker, ever, 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 until about 4 years ago when I started the keto journey. And my friend who had lost a bunch of weight, she said, "You got to try this in your coffee." And I thought, I don't drink coffee. And she said, "Try it, just try it." And I tried it once, and you use a frother, and mix everything up,
Oh.
and it's delicious. And so ever since then, I'm like, oh, I got to have my coffee every day with butter.
Welcome to the dark side. Caffeine is my friend. Well,
Right.
thank you so much, listeners. She's at susansnowspeaks.com. I'm going to have all of her information in the show notes when we publish. And all I can say, Susan, is you're amazing. You give people inspiration and hope. And we send light and love to your brother and your mom, and
Thank you.
hoping that they also can find some healing. And you're just a beautiful soul that brings beautiful things to the world and paying it forward. And you found your purpose and your light. And I know as a medium, I can tell you your father is smiling down and so darn proud of you. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for this hour of your life that you gave to each of us as a gift. And stay there and we'll talk in just a moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, that's going to wrap us up for this week's episode. A little housekeeping. You know where to find me for life coaching, confidence coaching, healing, anything, confidence, dating, relationships, lifecoachmaureen.com. Don't forget my books as well, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Outskirts Press. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. And then most of all, you got to go check out our doggy boutique with nothing but healthy ingredients, 3-ingredient treats for puppies and kitties, lots of apparel. I just restocked with winter stuff and raincoats and safety items for your puppies. So that is mydogiseverything.net. We ship, so just go on there and order, and we'll get that out to you within 24 hours. So that'll wrap us up. I love you all for being here. Again, share the podcast, subscribe, don't miss any episodes. We may be going to a paid subscription soon where you will get ad-free episodes. So stay tuned for that. I do have book number 3 coming out in the next 2 months, and it's a children's book. So be ready for that. And leaving on that note, be fantastic like Susan, and take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Most of all, take care of those furry babies, and please adopt, don't shop. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.